It's being recorded for future playback, and you'll receive any links to resources after the events. If you have any questions during the event, you can post them using the Q&A link at the bottom of the Zoom page, and we'll get to them either during or at the end, time permitting. And thank you again. My name is Brad Tubbs. I'm the president of Willis Construction Consulting. We're an estimating firm located in Maitland, Florida. And now I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Dana.
Hello, I'm Dana Muller. I am a project manager and technical director with Gensler here in Tampa. My focus here in Tampa is commercial office buildings, workplace, and higher education work. And I've worked with Brad on some of those things before. I'm also a UF grad, so I'm really excited to be here with Frank.
You're on mute, Frank.
There you go. I'm Frank Bosworth. I'm the director of the School of Architecture at the University of Florida. Some of you may also be familiar with our City Lab Orlando program as well. And Jeff?
Yes, thanks, Frank. My name's Jeff Suter. I'm a principal at EDSA located in our Fort Lauderdale office. I also lead the charge for our Southeast Caribbean team. So we're just happy to be here and excited to be on the panel. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's get started. Dana, why don't you talk a little bit about the future of our workplace and work, and how's your workplace changed?
Well, my workplace is behind me now here at home, as are most people. I know that Jeff is already back in the office a bit, but a lot of Gensler is still working remotely. And, Gensler does a workplace survey every year. And right before everybody went home for COVID, we, back in March, we released a workplace survey that was basically the results of 2019. But if you're on our website, which a lot of what I'm talking about is available on our website under the research tab, but the 2019 workplace survey was really revealing to us that we were having trouble focusing in our workplaces, that we were really dense in our design, and also that we had a lot of collaboration space that was great, but people were still struggling to focus. And so what's been interesting about the change in our workplace and, going home and having a chance to, have all the focus time in the world is that, people's productivity has really not suffered. We've had great productivity in our firm, and we see that in some of our other clients as well. But people are struggling with a disconnection from the culture of their workplace and the community of their teams. So that's something that we're seeing in the current workplace surveys that we're doing. And something that you'll see on our website is called the work from home surveys. We're seeing that people are appreciating the additional focus from home, but really missing that connection to collaborate. And so that's one of the big things that we're seeing.
Yeah, that was one of my big questions is, our business, planning, designing, construction is really a relational business. Even the process of learning design, Frank, is relational. And so how are folks adjusting to not being able to, look over a drafting table together or be there at the computer screen together and collaborate on what their thoughts are?
Well, we're finding that, it's the technology that's available to us has really provided us innovative ways to work together. Calls like this one and things like Teams and ability to share screen and draw together. Those things are great, and they're actually enabling us to overcome some of those problems very well. But the ability to get that personal connection, people still want to go back to the office for that. So we think that there definitely is still going to be a desire when, in the future we all get to go back to work together, that there still will be a desire to have that collegial atmosphere again.
I think if I can add to that, Dana, EDSA, we were back in March, decided that the work at home were a little nervous, but to our surprise, we had a very strong IT department, and we had a lot of things in play that I don't know that we professionally or really realized that we had and how it was going to work. But the amazing part was, programs like Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, they quickly adapted and they made those platforms really easy for other people to jump on and be able to maneuver through various things. A lot of the positives that we saw when we were working from home was it seemed to be a lot more interaction and activity that was happening amongst the team, as well as with a lot of the consultants and clients. But also, kind of to a fault, a lot more communication was happening, and you start finding yourself inundated with Zoom calls or meetings all day long, and you kind of have to figure out how to balance that. I would say we came back early September. We really focused hard with our HR department, IT, and leadership to try to come back with a safe way. It was voluntary. You could volunteer at first, and then ultimately we kind of rolled out and initiated. But one of the things we found is productivity we didn't really see it drop off a lot in the beginning, but I do think kind of towards the end, before we did come back, like you mentioned, Dana, that sense of community, that outreach, that the culture, kind of start missing a little bit of that. And, there were individuals that were really wanting to come back to work. So we're fortunate that our office has a pretty widespread layout, and we're able to keep the social distancing and allow for that. So it's been a very positive to come back to work. We still have a few that are out, and it's more than fine if you can't come back. But it's really kind of been a great family atmosphere, I would say, for a firm of our size to have a lot of people come back.
What do you think, Frank? What about our students, your students?
This has been a very challenging semester, I think, for everyone at the university. That the Zoom environment is not ideal for teaching design, although we have in fact accommodated that, and the results that we're getting from the students are not significantly different than the work that we've seen in previous years. We're going back to face-to-face teaching in the spring, and at the same time, students will be able to elect whether or not they'll be online or face-to-face. So I don't have any experience with that yet, but we're hoping that it will benefit the students.
So do you guys think that we will go back to our, traditional commuting to work and going out to lunch every day and leaving at 5 o'clock and maybe going to happy hour or going to the house? Or
I don't, and not just Dana, but Gensler is not seeing the trend towards a traditional back to the way it used to be. I don't think everything is going to go back to the way it used to be. I think it's going to be a hybrid going forward. The flexibility that people have to not be spending 2-3 hours a day commuting has given people time in their life back, and it's improved this work-life balance back that that people were struggling with before. So we're seeing people wanting to have that flexibility, wanting to keep using these innovative techniques for getting their work done. Keep it going when it needs to happen. Get that study, that focus work done in an environment where you can focus, and go to the office when you really need to make those connections with the community. And we want to get people back together to protect the culture that, I'm sure that Jeff at EDSA, you have, sounds like a culture of collegiality that you're trying to protect as well. And we definitely want people to feel like they're part of a family, part of the Gensler family, but also give them that flexibility to do what they need to do. And we see it as I think going forward, we're going to see this as a must-have, this flexibility and innovative, entrepreneurial flexibility as a must-have for retention and recruitment.
I couldn't agree more with you, Dana, on that. I do think that we were struggling before all this, like how do you have people work in other places or work at home? And we were doing it, but I don't know that we were as quick to come around. And now what we've really learned is a lot of the individuals or everybody, they're responsible in the way in which they carry their professionalism. It's really been enlightening and a great experience. When you go to the clients and the work, a lot of the stuff, especially being in South Florida and the Caribbean market, we would have these workshops that you would go to and you spend 3 or 4 days and whatnot. I don't know that there's a complete substitute for that on the early kickoffs, but what we have found is you don't necessarily always have to pull all the design team together once something has been kicked off, and we can easily start communicating through the Zoom or through the internet. And our other groups that do international work, they've maybe had a little leg up on us on some of that, but I do think that that's going to continue to grow, and you're going to see more and more of that. It's going to probably be, how do we manage it to have a balance within the workplace to not get over consumed with the Zoom calls and all of that. But yeah. I do think there's a lot of positives that have come out of this, which is really good on how people conduct their business.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about, the college students, the design students that Frank is working with, starting to learn to exist in a design environment this way. I mean, when I think about my education, how collegial it was all about the community, all about being in the studio. If you weren't working in the studio, you didn't exist. Where were you? So I think it's interesting that, we're starting that in the education environment as well. I think it reinforces even more that it's going to be an expectation as these adults start to graduate and look for flexible options that support the lifestyle that they're accustomed to.
I don't think the universities and college level teaching will ever return to the way that it was before COVID. That there are things that we particularly learned in this period that are highly beneficial to teaching. We have access to professionals all across the United States that we would not normally have access to. There are, for example, in one-on-one work such as critique and thesis work, that actually Zoom is a better environment. So I anticipate that there's going to be a kind of blended sort of teaching that will continue long after we get through this event.
Well, if there's a percentage of us who aren't coming to the office or the workplace or the hospital or wherever anymore, how does that affect the work that you all do, the design work that you all do?
I'll kick off that one. That actually we've had a studio that was investigating that particular aspect of it. That I think it's a little too early to make absolute conclusions about it, but it seems to me that that physical spaces for the people we design for are going to need to be larger, particularly in office settings. That it may be that firms require less space if they rotate their faculty or their employees through the office rather than all being there simultaneously. And that's going to have an impact, I think, primarily on core urban areas where rents are extremely high.
Yeah. Dan and Jeff, what are your clients saying?
Well, it's interesting because we do a variety. I'm sure as Dana with Gensler. I mean, we do a lot of resort, which I think we're going to get into that a little later on. A lot of public spaces, some retail. I think retail is going to be one of those things that we have a couple clients that are trying to re-envision what that space means and how you actually bring somebody back into that market. So it's going to be a big challenge. It was already a challenge before this in that component. We've got a lot of clients, at the very beginning of the pandemic, a lot of projects went on hold. It seemed like the stronger ones really came back quickly. The ones that didn't really come back, they probably were experiencing financial or, some type of strain that maybe wasn't going to allow. But what we've experienced is there's a lot of built up, work that's out there, and I really see a positive flow. I mean, we've written a lot more proposals than we ever have. I don't know if it's just because we're researching and finding more, but we are also having a lot of our consultants reach out, our clients reach out to us. So, I know everybody's trying to re-envision or think what the future is going to look like. Office space is going to be something different. We were in a situation not too long ago where we were worrying about how we would fit more people, and our building had some opportunities to open up some other spaces, so we were able to spread those out. So that was good for us. But how do you make that work in an environment today where before we were trying to figure out how to put more people in a smaller space? Now you're going to look at like a much wider space or a flex schedule that allows for people to come and go much easier.
Yeah, what we're seeing, and we do a lot of research, and we're doing a lot of staying in touch with clients, even clients that aren't building anything or changing anything right now, to help us form our opinions and do some projecting of our own into the future. As everybody's crystal balls are a little bit murky right now, but the best that we can see is, we're seeing a lot more interest in designing the workplace for a post, pandemic coming back to the office, as really needing a lot of technology. The workplace has to enable the people who are there to connect with people outside of the workplace. The workplace is not going to just be internally focused anymore. It has to be connected with anyone and everyone that you could want to collaborate with. So we're seeing the need for technology going up, and the need for, rows and rows of desk space going down, because we think that focus work, it really is going home. So, changes like that we're able to explain what we're seeing, and to workplace clients that are coming in the door right now, when you present this sort of feedback to a client and they're able to go back to their own culture and say, does this align with our culture? And is this how we want to operate? It enables people to make those decisions, to either stay in place, move, compress, change their workplace. So we're finding that having that research available really is helpful in helping clients make those decisions to pull the trigger on workplace. And we're really excited about that. We're excited to start implementing some of these changes now.
Are there some best practices that we've learned or we should learn to move forward in the name of global health?
I think that what is really interesting about the global health topic that you mentioned is the mechanical systems, health and materials, designing environments that really are focused on internal health. This is a great conversation. It's something that we should have been doing possibly, 20 years ago, and then maybe we wouldn't have had some of these problems that we're having right now. So I think one of the things that I'm most interested in, the conversations I'm most interested in that are happening right now, is what can we be doing that we should have been doing anyway, that are not changes that are really going to be impacted by, or should be impacted by, this pandemic, or whatever this COVID come back to work is. Changes that we should be making for health in general. The research on that is really compelling, and there's some great materials developing out there, some great products that are really focused on just the long-term health of people in groups. So I think that's something to watch.
And I think in addition to that, just if you get outside of the building and the mechanicals in the spaces and how a building operates, a lot of it's just going to be how you manage your personal space and the way in which you interact with people. I mean, that's a big one right now. And, a lot of cultures, it's customary to hug and shake hands, and the way in which you go about that. And, it's really been a cultural change of how you treat that situation. So I'll be curious moving forward to see how quickly some of those things come back, or if they change and they stay different. But yeah.
I think one of the significant changes will be the renewed concern among groups of employees about the other employees' health. That I think this recent experience has caused us all to be concerned about the greater good of our institutions rather than only our personal needs. And I think that's actually quite a dramatic shift.
Great point. Great point. Jeff, I know one exciting thing for EDSA is you guys have always thought about exterior spaces and rooms, and maybe this opens up some more opportunity for you all to.
Yeah, it kind of excites us a lot too, because when you really look at it, a lot of the program elements and everything that are happening on the exterior of the building and how you tie that back, as a landscape architect and a land planner, we always kind of look at it as an extension of the built environment, or the environment outside goes inside the building, and it's pretty seamless. But I really feel the true success, and hopefully as landscape architects we've been doing this, is when you take a space, it's how do you break that down, and how does it become, if it's a user space that wants to house 100 people, how does that feel when you have 10 people or 5 people within it, and really kind of start making that dynamics in those interactions that happen within those zones. And we've had several clients right now that a lot of maybe their fee and what they were spending, a lot of times when it comes down to a project, the compromise happens towards the end, and it's for better or worse, it's the product that we're working on, and a lot of the VEs, various things happen. I see where clients have come back in a lot of instances and said, we want to spend more money. We want to renovate, whether it's a resort, how do you renovate that and make the pool area be better and safer and create more spaces for people to get in and around and interact. So I do think that you're going to see a lot more of that in the near future, whether it's community design, resort design. Again, our mall that's located in Fort Lauderdale has been dying, and there's a big push right now to potentially do something different. And how do you bring the people in that socialization? And I think a big key is going to be capitalizing on that exterior space.
Well, it kind of moves us into, what about our friends in the tourism business here in Florida? What needs to happen, do you think, Jeff, in order for our tourism to come back?
Tourism is kind of a shaky thing. I think, a lot what you're going to maybe see in the U.S. is the comfort zone of people, and you've seen a lot of it over the summer, whether they're buying bicycles, they're, getting in the car, traveling to more places. I think the resort or the hotel's been a little bit slow to come back, but the ones that have a strong reputation and have put into place, filtration systems within the units and how they treat it and advertise it, that's been a little bit quicker. The airline travel, whether you believe the statistics or not, is a lot of what they've done, the HEPA filters and stuff that they put on the airplanes, they've actually really been a safe means of transportation. Whether the social aspect of that is hitting people's minds yet or not, but I think there's, the vaccine is going to be a big thing. Thank goodness something's, come out in the last couple of days. We know that in the next months to come, there's going to be more of them. Hopefully there'll be a confidence within the U.S. and outside of the world that that vaccine is something that's worthwhile to take. And it's really going to be getting that confidence and that social level back into it, I believe.
Are we going to need to redevelop or reprogram parks and resorts and cruise ships?
Well, parks are an easy thing. I don't really see that. I think you're probably going to see more of an upsell on the parks and the park systems within communities and the importance of it. Fort Lauderdale, fortunately, about a year ago, passed almost a $1 billion bond to redo a lot of their parks, and it probably couldn't be timely. So you see a lot of resurgence. The hard part right now is I have little kids and they want to go play on the playgrounds, and they've just recently opened back up, but the comfort level as an adult is, do you want to let your kids go play on it? So the open space, the lawns, the trails, if you want to try to buy a bicycle for your child who's outgrowing their little tiny bicycle, good luck finding one. I think there's been a resurgence of the outdoor and the space. Golf is another one that for many years was on a decline and you didn't see a lot of it. I think there's going to be a tremendous market for renovations of golf courses and what happens in and around. So resorts, We've got a few clients that have come online as of recent, one up in West Palm Beach that is really putting an emphasis on their amenity package and how to up that one even more so. Um, so it's exciting for us. I think that, there are things that we've practiced, but it's going to be a little bit of an easier sell for, a landscape architect or a planner in that regard.
Dana, any thoughts?
Well, we're working, Jeff and I are working together on a resort over in Cocoa Beach, and ironically, there's a park immediately to the north of it, and there's been a lot of discussion with that resort developer. It's a developer-led project about how to capitalize on that park within the amenity package of the resort that we're developing. And so it's been a really interesting conversation, and there's some great partnerships with the city developing out of it, where the developer and the city are talking about ways to activate the park in a different way based on, the needs, expanded needs of outdoor space for those outdoor events that we foresee coming in the hospitality industry, because getting large groups of people inside, even though it may be safe in the future with the vaccine development and all that, it may not be something that people want to do. And there may still be this attraction to being outside because we've all been forced out there together. So that's been interesting, and a change that I wonder if that would have happened in a different environment before. So I'm excited to be getting involved, a lot more involved in designing these outdoor spaces with firms like EDSA, and not having all the gathering and the programming of spaces be internal to the building, really looking at a lot more from a design perspective at that indoor-outdoor relationship.
Danny, you made me think of one other project that was with Gensler with your group, and it was in Norman, Oklahoma, in Cleveland County, and it was the county courthouse. And this was, before COVID, but, knowing the client and the way that this is working, they were doing a heavy emphasis on how do you bring the public space back into a courthouse. If you took at the turn of the century, you used to have a lot of that. It was a place that people would go get married and celebrate certain things. And over time, it's changed, and it's kind of got this bad rap because a lot of people are going to court for various things. But they really saw the importance of putting art within the public space, how they reach out within the community. So I think not just the tourism in the resort market, but overall, you're going to see a resurgence of outdoor, living in space, and that promotes actually healthier living as well too. I know that through all of this, people haven't eaten out as much, and you start buying your groceries, and you're buying hopefully healthier groceries and not so much. You're out walking more. That just the community involvement within the neighborhood. I live in a single family residential neighborhood, and I can honestly say that I didn't even know half the people in my neighborhood after 8 years, and within 10 months, it's really neat to kind of see everybody out still walking, engaging in a safe manner, and using the neighborhood.
Dana has talked a bit about research, and I know obviously UF does a lot of research, and EDSA does also. Frank, talk to us a little bit about the threat of the pandemic and climate change. You're on mute, Frank. Frank, you're on mute.
You think I'd know how to do this by now.
It proves it's
Sorry,
live.
folks. Let me try to contextualize this just a little bit. That the threat of climate change is going to significantly impact the way in which we design and redesign urban areas, and that the pandemic is also causing us to rethink the ways in which we design and redesign public spaces in our urban environments, and that the threat here is not to let one exceed the importance of the other. And for example, we're opening a new city lab in Jacksonville, whose complete focus is on the relationship of the built environment to the natural environment. And it's in Jacksonville because of the relatively unique structure of the environmental systems there. It's going to be probably one of the most important things that our students will need to learn as they go through school and be able to bring the knowledge from research into the firms that they eventually end up with.
I read an interesting piece of research from Gensler last year. I think all of your offices, Dana, that are in a coastal city kind of collaborated on the water rise and what's going to happen, what's going to need to happen from a mitigation standpoint, but also when we're building these new facilities, how we're going to need to address climate change.
We've developed what's called the Center for Hydro-Generated Urbanism on the UF campus, and that they are doing research on all of these topics. One of the things that we have learned thanks to spatial analysis and the use of technology is that many of our disadvantaged communities are at much higher risk than other parts of urban areas, and that it may in fact begin to cause a shifting in the way in which we think about the redesign of the urban infrastructure. And that I think that Jeff, have you been getting anything like that?
A lot of the larger scale planning, and it goes even further, it's social and everything. But, the unfortunate part was a lot of these neighborhoods, I think that you're alluding to, because of where the lands were and the way in which they were developed. Yeah, you definitely got to start thinking about how that happens, the environmental impacts, again, both from the climate control to the social and everything. Being a coastal, our office is in a coastal setting. A lot of the work that we do in South Florida is along the coastline, the Caribbean, even into our Central and South America. So it's been a challenge. It's one of the things that I think people are finally starting to realize, it's real, it's happening. You can see it. You can see it with the King's tides year in and year out now. It's not getting any better. A lot of the rains that we have within South Florida, the stormwater systems weren't designed to handle them. So you're seeing a lot of the communities, coming together, figuring out a lot of different studies that are happening. So it is very impactful, and it's one of those things that it's viewed differently from, I think, the private sector versus the public sector. And so how do you kind of bring the two of them together to start coming up with smart solutions on how you do it? And when you really look at, for example, a lot of things that are happening in the islands, if you get a fluctuation within a foot or two of it, it has a drastic impact on the beaches, where the design happens, what you're doing. And socially, you're not able to produce more land. So it does affect a lot of countries in a negative way. We have a big study that we've been working on in the Turks and Caicos that really takes into impact their entire country and what a lot of these things are happening along the coastline. So
I think a frequently unobserved condition is happening now, particularly in Florida. It's called climate migration, and that we're seeing particularly Central Florida have high population increases, a lot of churn as people leave the coastal areas and look for safer places to live, that this is significantly impacting the housing market, particularly affordable housing.
Right. Yep. Sure is. Sure is. What can we do to deliver projects that are more resilient to unexpected change? The rising water levels, future pandemics. Jeff used the term black swan a couple of weeks ago in a conversation we were having.
Well, no, I can sort of start us off on that. Gensler we issued ourselves something we're calling the city's climate challenge, which is to, within a decade, eliminate all net emissions associated with our work. This is an internal challenge that is not necessarily related to a client coming to us and saying, hey, I want to do a net zero building. This is a challenge that we feel like is important to do exactly that, Brad, to position us to respond to, we don't know what the next thing is. And we really just feel like we need to lead the charge internally and with our clients and in the industry as a firm of our size in moving design and, you know, our treatment of the environment in the right direction. So that's something that's really important to us. The goal is to be to be net zero in 10 years. And so far, we've eliminated 16 million tons of CO2 in the buildings completed to date since we've decided to commit ourselves to this challenge. So so it's something that our firm is really taking seriously and sees as the type of thing that can do, we think, what you're asking, Brad.
I know at a ULI conference a year and a half ago that was in DC, Washington, DC, you know, one of the big topics and things that we learned about was, you know, the whole city as a whole, where they want to be to that CO2 and a lot of that. And there's a big major push. So it's going to take communities to really kind of start pushing the limits, which will accelerate, you know, a lot of the technology, the learning, the thought process, how we're doing it. Yes, it does cost money. It costs money for our clients. So we have to be aware of that as we move forward in our designs and how we help engage their designs. I also really feel one of the strong things that we've been talking about internally that is going to come into play is partnering up more with some academics like with Frank and their group and other universities to help with a lot of that research so that, you know, we can be more intelligent with the way our designs and what the effects are. You know, we have theory of what we've done over the, you know, the past 60 years of our company, but to really start putting the numbers. And I believe a lot of the communities and even the private sector is, you know, when you can show that data and what you can do, it's a much easier sell to be able to push some of the initiatives that we want to start seeing happen in the future.
I think that one of the things that's happening, at least at UF, is that there's been a kind of internalization of the ideas that have to do with materiality and site placement, all of the aspects that apply to reducing energy consumption and selecting the right materials to reduce our carbon footprint. And I think that goes to sort of the original part of the question you asked, Brad, which is how do we prepare for what we don't know? And that there are some scholars who think that this is largely a matter of paying attention to the knowledge that we already have and selecting the right materials, and that it's going to require a shift from always looking to the least expensive modality for construction to the one that actually has the greatest resilience.
Absolutely. Well, I think the one huge thing that has happened for our business in 2020 is a shift in our business models. How have you all seen your business model shifted or changed this year? And specifically, you know, I think that Frank, that there's some thoughts that you have about academics and business partnering more.
It's sort of hard to think about the University of Florida in that way, but the model that many architecture schools are going to, and one that we adopted several years ago with the IPAL program, was to find ways in which to connect both the faculty and students more effectively, not only with professionals for their opinions about what we do, but for students to understand what it means to be a professional when they leave school. And that this is really quite a culture shift for us. And that I think in the long run that it matters and will really produce a more interesting and vibrant environment as our new graduates begin to enter the workforce.
What do you think,
And,
Dana?
and to that, on the EDSA front, we couldn't have had them, what has happened this year, and with some of the slowdowns and various other things, we were also already kind of advancing and thinking about how we take EDSA. We celebrated our 60th year this year, but how we propel in the next 60 years, and what are the things that we do differently, what was the past and the history that worked well that we want to take with us, but where are the changes? I mean, everybody has something a little bit different over the 60-year period, whether it's the employee, the client, who we're working for. So one of the things that we've really focused on is really getting a little bit more focused in the area of which we work in. So hence the Southeast Caribbean team was born. We have several others. We have a total of 6 teams now, really wanting to make sure that we know and own our backyards, putting a business development forward approach to everything that we do. And then, ultimately what we talked about earlier on in the conversation is then how do you overlay that flexibility and the work-life balance that's, needs to be or happens, as far as architecture and kind of that design part of the world, we're one of those professions that it's not a standard 40-hour work week. So how do you, people that enjoy what we're doing, we love it, we pour our heart and soul into it. And sometimes, we get a little carried away with that work-life balance. So how do you always kind of bring that back full circle to make sure that that's a meaningful thing for everybody?
No,
I would say outwardly focusing, our business model hasn't changed a lot. We're so client focused that, whatever, we remain client focused, and whatever the client is really passionate about really inspires us. So that hasn't changed. I think one of the things that has been exciting as far as I don't know that this is exactly a business model, but we've always done a lot of research, and lately research is what people want most. They don't want trends, they want research. And so it's been really exciting to be able to expand that research and share it out with people, because in the absence of a crystal ball, research is kind of the best you can do. So we've definitely stepped up the research, which has been awesome internally as well, because we have a lot of people who are passionate about research. And I'd love to see us start to team more with education, with students, and with Frank's group. That would be awesome, as we continue to try to look around us and see what's going on, and so that we can move in the right direction together.
Brad, I also feel, with that, whether it's the built environment or the natural environment, flexibility is important, and moving forward, not knowing what's going to happen. So, for example, if you take an internal space, how do you make it flexible? How do the walls move? How's the HVAC system? What are the things that you can do to make that flexible? You pull the same thing to the exterior of the building, like how does it interact with the space? If it's a college campus, are we going to start capitalizing on, like especially in South Florida, more overhang shade? How do you make that? How's the solar voltaic go into it, that it's done in a tasteful way that creates shade but yet energy in the same manner? That's what's really exciting. That's not just because of what's currently happening, but just the way the direction and the trends have been going over the last few years. And you really see, I think, what few projects I've worked on in China and Central America, some of the countries that you might not think would be leaders or thought leaders on that, they're really pushing the envelope on a lot of it. So, it's just neat to see that kind of be kind of a world issue that's people are starting to tackle.
Yes.
Not just the U.S.
Dana hit a little hot button word for me, outward thinking, and that goes with research. Actually, speaking to people and determining what they like and what works for them, and instead of coming with a presupposed solution to a presupposed problem, right? Listening to our clients and giving them what works for them, and not cookie cutter.
There is no more cookie cutter.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And that's exciting to me. I'm a fan of architecture, so that's it. So we've talked a little bit about students and academia, and those students are moving into the workplace. So how are we adjusting to the new talent, or getting ready to adjust to that new talent? And then also, I've noticed that when we've had significant events, there has been a shift in the workplace, that people have moved their area of study or expertise, and maybe there's a hole in the talent. So how do we avoid that this time?
Wow, I wish I could answer that. I'm going to have to let Jeff and Dana sort of take the lead on this one. I'm producing the raw materials. You get them.
Well, we've always taken great pride and had a very strong outreach program to a lot of the universities, and we go all over the United States to capture students. When events like this happen, what's kind of scary, and it happened in 2009, 10, and then it happened again back in 2001 with 9/11, is you see certain professional offices and things that happen, and there's potential redundancy of positions and people. A lot of what happened was people left the workforce or the workplace, and they didn't just leave architecture or landscape architecture or engineering. They went to completely different degree fields and found themselves with a whole new different professional work. Then where it really starts to happen is over the course of time. I think we've seen it. You start getting these gaps of student, or gaps of professionals within the office that might be missing, and you kind of trace it back to that. So it's always like, how do you keep people in the workforce that you need, but then how do you backfeed it and make sure that happens? I know a lot of the universities that study landscape architecture and planning, for whatever reason, it's been on a decline. And I do know the reason. I do know some of the reason, not all of it, but they have been on a decline. For example, I went to Oklahoma State, and one of the initiatives that the university is doing there, the president he's trying to make sure that all your understudy degrees, we're a 5-year BLA program, but how can you make it become a 4-year program so it becomes that much more attainable and affordable for people? And so I think at a university level, as professionals, we need to make sure that we stay involved and get linked up with universities, and we pay back some, and just really encourage. Now, for moving forward, for 2021, we're seeing a need that we're going to be in a position that we're going to be hiring some people. So it's a good spot for us. We're excited about it. I don't know the plans of how we're going to do it. We already do the Zoom calls and the interviews. It normally comes down to an in-person interview that we normally have, that we fly the candidates in. How that changes, I don't know. One of the things I think that's going to be missed from 2020 is the lack of internships. Like I said, we have a big internship program, and we might have anywhere from 15 to 25 interns that would come through. So we're really missing that. That was one of our, key things that we did for employment, was to expose as many kids to the professional world, but it also, helps us professionally to introduce people in and make sure not only do we have a good fit with them, but that the investment that we're getting ready to make with a new employee, that they like where they're working. And that's very important. So it's going to be interesting how 2021 rolls out.
I think that one of the other, and I hesitate to call it a trend, but one of the things that seems to be happening around design education is specialty concentrations or new degree programs that focus on things that can bring a level of expertise into firms that a generalist education can't actually provide a student. For example, we're beginning a program in acoustics, in sustainable architecture, and computational design as a strategy for trying to find ways to present more opportunities for our students in what we consider to be potentially a difficult job market for them, and at the same time to cooperate more with firms. We're in the midst of talking with the design community in Orlando about actually creating an industry-focused degree in health and environment design. So I think you're going to see more universities and colleges reaching out to the profession to actually find out what they need and try to respond in that way.
Frank, will that be centered at City Lab in Orlando or in Gainesville?
The healthcare program,
Yes.
It'll start in Orlando, and it's likely that we will offer it on main campus. Thanks to Zoom, we now can do a lot of things that we didn't think we could do before. And so we haven't quite figured out all of that yet, but that's what we're working on.
We had a question from one of the participants. Said he would like to ask Frank what they see as impacting the next generation or Generation Z within the AEC industry in context of the current environment. What do you think? And that's to anyone, but Frank first.
Well, that requires the crystal ball. I'm afraid that the challenge is that at least in architecture schools that we are required to deliver a base knowledge that enables people to become professionals, and there's very little flexibility in that. So that's not likely to change very much. What will change is what the content of that is, that we see AI, artificial intelligence, computational design, and prefabrication to be really things that are going to come to the forefront in the next 20 years, and ultimately are going to change the way that we make things.
Is there a tension between what new graduates or entrants into the workforce expect and what employers expect?
Wow, that's the age-old question, right? Yes, there's always a tension about that. Although firms seem to be converging with educational institutions that in addition to having the base knowledge that one needs to do a job, that they need to be good critical thinkers, need to speak well, and be able to respond at a job site when there's a question, as opposed to going back to the firm. And that those are things that I hear quite regularly. And then the biggie is that our students don't write very well, and that needs to be improved. And we're working on basically all those things.
I think, Frank, to that too, and I'm glad you touched on that. A lot of it is the way in which you communicate, and you have that, whether it's through written or presentation, and that level of professionalism. That's a very important thing. I like the fact that you talked about artificial intelligence. EDSA, we've now created our own virtual design studio, trying to figure out how we implement, some of the things we've experienced over the years is, architecture has really taken off with the Revit more so than the AutoCAD and that. It has not integrated very well with the outdoor, the natural world. So, how do we partner up with Revit and various firms such as Gensler and others to really kind of amp up so we can have that connectivity through that clash detection and various other things that happen within it. But I also feel like one of the things that's happened more recently is with a lot of the students is when they come in, there's a lot of, challenge us as professionals to make sure that we're practicing what we say and that we're really investing within that. And that's one of the things there's a lot of importance that's been played into how people view their spaces, what they're doing, what they want to do, what the design needs to be. And, a lot of the younger kids are really in tune with it. So you got to take somebody such as myself, who's been out for almost 30 years, and make sure that we're still current, relevant, and we're still not, losing sight of the end picture. But like, how do we bring in a lot of that vigor, that new thinking? Technology is a huge thing. It's how do you, for years, EDSA has been known about our hand graphics and all that, but we're in a world now that even in conceptual design, we're already starting to figure out pieces through Rhino and various other programs that are very informative, and they can help inform design if that tool is used the right way. So how do you balance that?
Dana, what are you guys looking for?
Well, so, there's another question that's up that I think actually, if I were to, what I was going to say in response to what Frank and Jeff just said is sort of an answer to this question as well, which is, I think that, as we start to look at new recruits and this next generation that's coming up, I don't see a lot of tension. I'm excited about the young folks that I'm meeting that are coming out of school. There's so much more entrepreneurial spirit now than when I graduated. I don't remember when I graduated and there were no jobs for anybody, which is what happened when I graduated. People being like, well, I'm just going to start I'm going to make my own startup, or I'm going to start my own charity. And that's happening. People are doing that. And their ability to communicate, the ability to communicate your thoughts, which seems like a real simple thing, but I struggle with it on a daily basis. And, a lot of young folks coming out of school, I see struggling with it. I think that's the biggest challenge, and also the biggest opportunity for success with this entrepreneurial spirit, because you can have all and we've had these people in to interview, and they present beautiful renderings and virtual reality and great pictures, and I can make up a story about it, but they can't tell me what they were thinking when they were doing it, or making this design or coming up with this design. So I think that the development, the continued development, not only of creative thinking, but in the ability to communicate your own thoughts is that biggest gap or opportunity.
The young people today, to me, are getting such a good, they're so well educated. They get so much more than we got, and at least myself and my generation got in high school and college. But the social is where they need to, that's what allows them to, supercharge their involvement in the career. And the writing and speaking is just paramount to that. So we've got another question here. Because of the pandemic, companies are seeing businesses still being accomplished. Will businesses decide to cut down on office space, DC? What do you?
I'll take this one. We are seeing businesses cut down on office space. There was here in Tampa, the name is going to escape me, but there was a healthcare company or insurance company that had an entire building up in North Tampa that the lease was going to be up, and they just said, nope, we're done. We're not going back to the office at all. At least not that office. And so, one of the things that we're seeing as an opportunity there is the opportunity to go in and reposition those buildings for those developers or owners, and try to, rethink what that office space could be. We're seeing some really interesting conversions of, office space to apartment buildings come up in the marketplace with developers, which is interesting and exciting. And so, I definitely see some of that. We're not going back to the office happening, but it may not be altogether a bad thing. There could be some new opportunities there.
Yeah, agreed.
Another client that we have in Orlando is, again, they got another parcel that was maybe going to be developed out, and it might house a hotel as well as another office building. And so, they're trying to rethink now as far as retention of their clients and what they're going to do. Maybe that parcel becomes something different, whether it's an interim use or a long-term use. But, again, the outdoor connection, do you do ball fields? Do you do exercise spaces that are different than what you typically would have, to allow people to go outside to do that? Social areas, how do you, people that want to, be able to bring their lunch and eat it, or is there ways that vendors can come in with the food trucks? So, I do think that there's going to be a big change with the office space. How long it stays and what it does, I don't know. I know, Dana, your team, you guys are really good at, when you go in the very early stages of understanding the programming of the buildings and the functions and the uses. So I imagine a lot of that data you've already built up through the years is going to be something that's going to be, you can't even put a price tag on it moving forward on a lot of this.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I had a comment that the real estate board in Manhattan just requested rezoning to move about 10% of all office space in Manhattan to residential. I don't know how many square feet of Class A office there is in Manhattan, but a couple million square feet.
Wow.
Well, what will be interesting, and I'm not an expert by any means about New York or Manhattan, but for years there's that pent up with the rent and the protection of the rent. And then through the course of the pandemic and whatnot, one of our clients who was a design group out of New York, they just announced that they're moving their entire practice down to Miami to get away some of the regulations and restrictions that they're currently encountering in New York. And then when you really start following some of the housing market and the trends in that, the single family, the multifamily, and things that are in the Fort Lauderdale or the Tri-County area here, the housing market has exploded again. And so, the housing for local people is getting priced out because you're getting a lot of the northern families and groups that are moving out of that. So, that's kind of a direct effect of the pandemic and people understanding the value of, again, the single family. A lot of what's happened in the downtown core, or the high rise or the mid rise, whether it's the rental market or the condo market, it's really been the rental market through the years. On one of the webinars that we were on recently that had to do with housing is, that's kind of pushing back out to be suburban and not be part of the urban core, which I hope that's a limited thing. I really like seeing the population of the downtowns and getting that density in core, but people are really starting to put the value and understand the value of their personal space when it comes to just their homes and the way in which they interact within the community.
We're seeing that same exact thing here in Central Florida, Jeff. The need for housing for us, it's of all sorts. It's the multifamily and single family, and even we've had a couple of announcements here actually this week of converting office space to residential. It was work retail, dining and entertainment, and now they're going to increase the residential components to that. So that's exciting.
I mean, if you look at just the demographics, I think Tampa and Jacksonville are maybe in the top 5 as far as growth right now, and Orlando's probably not very far behind in that category. So there's going to be a lot of pressure over the next few years in South Florida, just with work and how we balance that, the living space and then the office space. Retail, good luck. I mean, that's going to change drastically, and who knows where that's going to end up.
I was recently at a webinar where this topic was being discussed, and in relationship to new strategies for developing single-family housing, and that this is not my particular area of research, but it appears that there is going to be a shift for actually larger housing to accommodate people working remotely, and basically for extended families, and that I don't think that bodes well for new office construction that if that continues to happen, uh, the, that number for Manhattan is an astounding, absolutely astounding number.
Sure is. Well, I will tell you one thing that I hope, and especially in single family, as we develop, that we've learned what we've done with these, urban infill residential, and be intentional about the outdoor spaces and the parks and the trails and things like that, so that we have, connectivity, and places to get out and relax. Surely if I'm not getting in my car and having my cup of coffee and getting ready for my day, I'd like to maybe take a walk and get ready for my day. What do you guys think?
I completely agree. I mean, you go to places in North Carolina, other areas, where the trail systems are much further advanced. South Florida is a tough situation because climate can change so rapidly, especially down in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that everybody's still dependent on their cars and, big heavy things that move. We finally were getting the Bright Line. It was up and going. It's kind of been on hold through all of this, but the way in which we re-envision our workday and what we're doing it's going to continually change. When you look at electric vehicles, you look at smaller modes of transportation. Saw a webinar the other day. I think it was the founder of the Bird scooters and the way the carbon credits and all that work. I know Gensler had a huge study about the driverless car a couple of years ago. There was that came out. People all thought, wow, that's really crazy. And now you start seeing all the tests and the actual cars that are coming out on the market. So it's an interesting time. I think the pandemic is, for better or worse, is probably accelerated a lot of this much faster. It's allowed for people to re-envision, like you mentioned, the workload place, what's going to happen. It's just, how do we then backfill or keep those spaces that are there and repurpose them into another flexible use in the future.
And we have looks like a question teed up really good for you. You see it? The desire for more square footage per employee helps soften the blow of fewer workers in the office. So if we're still going to have corporate spaces, I would imagine. I don't think that we can go away from corporate space.
Yeah, no, it's not going away for most people. I think the question is just going to be, what is it doing? And we think that it's going to be really focused around providing connectivity between people, collaboration spaces with the ability to connect via technology out to the rest of the world, and giving people that balanced work experience, which is, focus wherever it is that you need to focus and work together here with us in our, corporate environment. It's not going away, but it's also not going back to the way it was before. I mean, do we think that there's more square footage per person? Definitely. It's definitely a less dense environment. People aren't going to want to be sitting on top of each other anymore. And the new health demands, what we know now about how we got in this spot is too powerful to not respect, and nobody's going to want to be in that workplace. So we have to create environments that people want to be in and people feel safe in.
I think an interesting case study would be if you went back to the early 2000s and you looked at education as a whole. Everybody was saying, the virtual degrees that you would get online, and how the brick and mortar school was, in decline, and you're going to see the campuses disappear, and everybody was going to flock to that. And it did for a certain period, but then it kind of became, part of the right when you do go to a university is, you get to go to that brick and mortar school, you get to, graduate from the high school, you get to meet your friends, and, you progress your professional career through that. So, looking back on how that happened to, like I look at where Frank sits today, and, the university there's so many students that want to go to school there that a lot of them have to actually go to a 1 or 2 year school in order to get into the bigger university. I think the Zoom and the the ability to do that, does that help grow that student mass for the various universities? It probably does. But, to eliminate the brick and mortar, whether it's through schools or office buildings, there's still always that social aspect that I think is super important. And I don't know how it's going to play out over the next couple of years, but it's going to be consumer confidence in the workplace. It was mentioned earlier about, every office had a sick leave policy, it seems like, whether it was 5 days, 10 days, whatever it was. I'm an old school person that, I come in with a cold and by gosh, I'm going to be at work and I want to be productive and I want everybody to be here, to where totally different outlook now. If somebody's got a sniffle, please go home. We don't need you here. You can work from your computer at home. So, that whole part of just even the HR world or the social. So it's going to be interesting. And I think it's a good thing. We're going to implement a lot of good things. I hope a lot of the bad things kind of get put on the shelf and we weed those out, but it's going to be an interesting transition.
So great question just popped up from Jennifer. Can you please provide your insights on how to make sustainable and socially responsible developments affordable design models for new developments as well as redevelopments? It kind of hits right your statement there, Jeff.
I'll start this one off. That for the most part, we haven't been successful in making things more affordable unless we just continue to make them smaller and smaller. And that it seems like we have reached the limit of that particular approach. And with the cost of materials, the cost of regulations for permits and impact fees, I don't see an easy way forward. Maybe you guys have got some suggestions there.
Well, I think it goes back to flexibility and thinking about resiliency. And
yeah, for the longest time here in Fort Lauderdale, I don't know that we had a market or allowed for the market to develop with like rental properties. So you had the condo, you had the single family. In 2009, the interest rates got really crazy, whether you had the ARMs or the flexible loans, and that kind of corrected itself. But what spurred out of that was there was a big push within the downtown core of Fort Lauderdale for, I don't know that I would call it affordable housing. I think Frank was spot on that, the unit size is reduced and it's gotten smaller and smaller. And whether it's, some of the projects you would see come across might be 60, 70% studio apartments. And, that type of living works for certain people. It doesn't work for all people. I do believe the trend of what we've heard or seen is it's going to be bigger units. And, I do see a resurgence, a lot of that single family. How do we make it affordable? I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one, especially with the costs and the construction and the materials going up. It's, the good news is money is cheap right now to borrow. It's probably been at a consistent lower than it's been, for a longest period of time. But, that also ownership doesn't always work out. A lot of the younger people like the opportunity to not only have flexibility in their workspace, but also where they live. So.
Francisco asks, do the panelists believe that the pandemic will accelerate WELL certified in-office education and hospitality markets? And do they feel that WELL will stick around more than LEED?
I'll take that one. I'll start with it. I don't see one as overtaking the other. They're very different. I definitely see an uptick in an interest in WELL buildings. We're working on the Water Street project with strategic property partners here in Tampa, and they're fully committed to WELL. That was the first WELL project that I had done and my first introduction to it. And at the time, a couple years ago when we started on that project, it was not, the rules weren't even very well defined for what you needed to do as a commercial office building to be WELL certified. And we've been sort of involved in the development of that with them and with Delos. But I definitely think that we're moving towards a recognition in the client market that WELL is important as a benchmarking tool for commercial spaces in the future.
All right. Travis asks, so our new office converted to open office environment just prior to the pandemic, similar to my last office at Disney that went open office a few years ago. What do you see from designing future office space and the idea of open office environments?
So open office is not going away, but our definition of what it is and the density of it and the ability for people to provide or to create privacy within an open office environment is really important. There's some really great products and workstation products and other, non-workstation products that are coming along, as well as just different ways of laying out an office that Gensler is studying. There's a couple links I can provide you with, Brad, if you want to share them out with folks on how, Gensler is studying the future of that open office environment and what we think it kind of looks like and different modes for working within it. But it's definitely changing, but I don't see it going away.
Yeah. I think so too. And Joe asked, in the Midwest, we're beginning to see a trend toward fabricating the interior modules of large-scale structures in an indoor assembly area, like a factory model, to take advantage of technology and staffing that operation. Are models like this spreading throughout the U.S.? Could this help reduce the cost of delivery?
I can start off with that one. I think that this is a logical outcome of fabrication advances that we've made, and that we're likely to see more and more of it. About 7 or 8 years ago, I went to Las Vegas and saw a building that was being constructed entirely from, or at least the steel of it was constructed entirely by robotic means from steel that was marked and fabricated in China. Whether or not that actually results in lower costs, I think the jury is out on that still. What there seems to be some agreement on is that the finished product is frequently better than if it is site built.
I can speak to that a little also. My opinion is a prefabricated model, there's a lot of benefit to it. It takes workers off a construction site, puts them in a safer environment. Quality control tends to be better in a controlled environment versus on site. Things like modeling can be done, quickly and parallel to the fabrication site. So you're going to have more consistency, I think, there. And just things that you don't even think about, like trash on the job site. It's a cleaner job site. The critical path can be optimized in a lot of ways. I'm a huge fan and proponent of prefabrication.
Brad, we also, several projects in the Bahamas. One in particular would be the island of Bimini, and there was a Hilton hotel, and we were part of it. And they did a modular approach. The developer owner is a big cruise ship person that actually, they do that for when they build their cruise ships. But, you're in a remote area. There's very limited housing for people to live there. The ability to get qualified workforce to move to the island and be a part of it. So they did do the prefab portion of it. And, it was really telling because it allowed the product to go together probably at a higher quality, or definitely at a higher quality, but also allowed them to pick up some speed and momentum in order to turn the project, and not have time delays in a setting that you normally would have that.
Right. Well, Jeff, go ahead and wrap up. Do you have any closing thoughts or key takeaways in the conversation?
No, I think, moving forward, it's amazing to have collaborative efforts like this with Dana, Frank, and yourself, Brad. As we go through, one of the things we've noticed is there is more of a collaboration, not just so much on projects, but people just reaching out to each other in the professional world. So that's been a welcome change. Looking forward to what lies ahead. I do believe that a lot of the research and the things that we talked about today are going to be key and vital to however we transform spaces, whether they're existing or we do our designs in the future. So again, thank you very much for having us, Brad.
Great, thank you. Frank?
You're on mute, Frank.
Sorry, my space bar is not working. Yeah, I echo what Jeff just said, and I do think that that we can look for some changes in particularly design education, that it's going from what used to be a very solitary endeavor to a more collaborative one, that there's more interest in working from data as opposed to opinion, and that at least at the University of Florida, we're very focused on research as creating the basis for a well-educated architect. And I think in the long run, that will probably affect a lot of different things. And as Jeff said, thank you for having me, Brad. I appreciate it.
You have the wrap.
I would echo what Jeff and Frank said, Brad. I've been really grateful to be a part of this, and I think that having conversations like this, whether they're public or private, has been one of the really nice things about this situation that we find ourselves in. Is we all want to learn from each other, and I think that keeps us going and keeps us becoming better. And so I hope that continues.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. All great friends, and it was a nice time to get together and discuss these things. Thanks for all the attendees that took time out of their schedule today, and just want to remind everyone that this has been recorded, and we will send out the link if you attended, and also resources will be sent out as well. So thanks again, and want to wish everyone a happy holiday. Bye.